Welcome back to my CGI reanimation JoJo project. Today, we'll finally dive right into texturing our main protagonist. Let's get right into it. Well, it's finally time to lock in and texture everyone. So for this, I need to finish Jotaro. Luckily, all I need to do is add his clothes, which I did not know would be as complicated. For starters, Jotaro's sleeves are very loose, which you can see I underestimated from moment 1. However, I at least got the base silhouette to work. But let's move on to the pants. As you can probably tell, baggy pants are the norm here actually, so I have to fluff up Jotaro's pants, and honestly, his are the straightest. They are baggy, don't misunderstand me, but they also make this cone-like silhouette, which is fun, until I got to the knee, because yes, this may look like it's scaled properly, but as always, be prepared to see how I need to fix every detail here, multiple times. And look at that beautiful side view, so deformed, the story of my life. So yeah, the name of the game is persistence. Let's be honest, these pants are not looking as big as originals, and once we look at the side, it gets even worse. And as I'm looking at this, I begin to question how accurate my adjustments were, and wouldn't you know it, the sleeves need to be bigger. And of course, wouldn't I know it, the elbow mesh is deformed as well. Good on me for clocking that from pants. But with a little bit of skill, I can actually manage to get this shape to work. It looks pretty straight, as well as being pretty fluffy. We're getting somewhere, guys. With that out of the way, we need to go to the pants, which in my case, this pant line is a little too close to the butt, so I have to be careful not to deform it. After all, would you be okay with anyone messing with your butt just for some pants? Another thing that I also need to get right as soon as possible is the outline for the neck. I'll need to extrude a pretty big quantity of flaps from here, so I really need this to work. And yeah, this took quite some time, so let's speed through this. More. Okay, so here, I'll extrude the flaps of his shirt. This won't be like the reference due to the mirror modifier, but I'll try to make them work. But do keep in mind, these new vertices are going to be hard to manage. I always have issues with pieces like this, because I don't really know how fake these pieces should be. What do you guys actually do? The good thing about this neck is that it doesn't need to be straight, and well, mine is easier to make messy rather than straight, so... Does it look good? Let me know. I'm always trying to adjust these meshes so it looks as good as possible, but try to be nice to each other. I noticed that my Okuyasu reel spawned the beginning of a heated argument, and yeah, I made him weird, and I plan on fixing him. Also, I'm not a professional, but I'm trying my best. I'm open to suggestions and comments, but don't fight each other. Jonathan wouldn't be proud to see you do that. Well, there's no avoiding it anymore. We have to add the pants mesh and avoid deforming Jotaro's spot. So I found that this little space here is the only one where I don't affect the mesh. So I decided to build the double belts here, and yeah, it was very tight, but I feel like it doesn't look that bad. Now, all we need to do is give it that nice circular shape. Okay, so we're getting close to finishing Jotaro. All I want to do is add the seam cuts for the UV unwrapping, just because this will ease the process. It's also a great opportunity to adjust parts of the mesh that didn't get the attention they needed, like this here that got vertices mixed up. I'll take this opportunity to get the details on Jotaro's shoes, which I only did because they were easier to make. I just needed to extrude the sole. Pretty cool. Also, it's kinda weird how Jotaro wears very simple shoes versus all the very fancy shoes everyone wears to school, and with these shoes done, I get to extrude his iconic coat. All I need to do is outline where the coat will be extruded from and mark the seam cut, again for ease of modeling. Once this is done, I extrude the coat and begin giving it more shape. This is always a hard process, since the legs can intersect the coat and that doesn't look good, so keep that in mind. And with that done, I move into the final part, the flaps of the coat. This one follows the same pattern as the shirt flaps, so I think I can leave you with the time lapse. One thing I want to remark is that you can clearly see why doing flaps like this is complex. Sometimes, stretching and matching the vertices to the reference requires a lot of tweaking, so the meshes don't overlap each other and we end up seeing the inner part of the mesh. And the last thing I need to do is adjust the belt, because I forgot to hide them as I was adjusting the coat and smoothing it out in sculpt mode. Now, in order for Jotaro to be texture ready, we have to apply the mirror modifier and begin adjusting the non-symmetrical details. So, for this diagonal chest belt, I decided to cut the shape and extruded it, which turned out to be a little more complicated than I expected. I tried adjusting the mesh so it would fit better, and it really didn't look that good. So, I decided to delete everything since I had run out of undos, and readjust the meshes while also adding more cuts to adjust the shapes. Just goes to show how some solutions are better than others. Now, here, I decided to leave this geometry to have some endguns and tries. And yes, I know this is not standard and all, but I do think it can work. Honestly, I'm thinking that many of the issues my meshes will end up facing will have to be solved with shape keys, since my rigging and weight paying skills can only go so far. But yeah, now with the belt done, all my focus has to go to his hat. For this, I decided to tilt it to the side like the reference, to be as faithful as possible. And yeah, this was probably as tedious as it could get, but I think it looks good so so far. Jotaro is the model that got closest to your expectations. You guys really love him. So yeah, I want him to look as good as possible. With the flap adjusted, I want to add the Joe in the hat to give it that three-dimensionality. Once that's done, I'll finish marking the seams and we should be done. That was a very lengthy process. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, because these ones are getting a little harder to make. Now, the next character I need to adjust is Okuyasu. Like I said, this one divided a lot of people, and I tried applying some comments I got to make his face a little softer, and believe me, I don't think this is the final adjustment he'll have. Truth be told, I'm going to struggle with Okuyasu for quite a while, but we're still early on in this process. But now, seeing there's not much I can do to Okuyasu, I decided to go for Koichi. As we all know, Koichi is another character I struggled with, and after playing around with him in the first scene, I realized that we just needed to tweak his head size. So that's what I'll do. Let's shrink his head, just enough to match better, and then get it right to the height he needs to be for his body. I also feel like I made him too thick rather than slim, like he actually is. So I'll fix that and also make his body longer. I think this really makes him look more person-like and not troll or anything distorted, you know? And once it's done, I just have to reposition his eyes, eyebrows, tongue and teeth, which I just found out need to be adjusted because they began to fuse together, and then do all of the seam cuts. Now for the star of the show, Josuke. Since I haven't really gotten any kind of complaint about him, I trust that all I need to do is add the extra details like the heart and peace sign brooch. As you can tell here, I forgot to apply the mirror modifier, so I had to redo the heart again. Luckily, it's just a small detail. The key to these pieces is to give them some bevel at the corner so they look more natural, and then all we do is turn them until they are placed in a more natural position. For the peace sign, I actually had some issues due to underestimating the amount of vertices I needed to get the lines inside of the circle, so I had to subdivide it, and with that, I think this ended up looking better. Like I said, these were the final details, so all I need to do is mark the seam cuts so that I can begin unwrapping it. Sadly, I forgot to go for the eyes, eyebrows, teeth, and tongue to mark the seams, so I had to work twice. But with all of that out of the way, all I need to do is unwrap the mesh. I feel like every project I make ends up with UV unwrapping sooner or later, and I can consider myself a little more experienced here. The method that worked for me this time was to have a clear separation of the meshes. I divided it by these groups: skin, hair, clothes, shoes, and the new details. The logic behind this being that these are a very manageable group of textures. Most people would use these groups as their own separate textures, but I won't. And yes, I guess I'm asking for you to hate me now. However, I need these textures to do different things, and managing just one single texture will be easier. Here's a plan. I grab these groups, join the meshes, and position them outside the texture space. Once I'm done with that, I can adjust every piece of the mesh, giving them proper hierarchy. For example, the face needs to occupy around the same space as the clothes, so the level of detail looks good on camera and in close-ups. Some other details like the shoes and the brooches don't really need that much detail space, because why would I zoom up on a shoe when it really isn't that big a deal? In this group of small details we have the teeth, mouth sack, tongue, eyebrows, and eyelashes, because they use very simple colors, so that really saves up space. Now it's Okuyasu's turn. If you've been paying attention to the length of this video, you could probably tell that there's not much time left, so sadly we'll have to make do with Josuke and Okuyasu for this video, so I'll try to hurry to get his UV meshes unwrapped. I just want to note that I had some issues with his jacket and pants. Like I said in previous videos, the pants got too close together, and that is a bigger problem than I thought, which will come later. However, one other detail I managed to miss was in the extruded part of the jacket, which for some reason I also missed, so there was a lot of tweaking involved. But yeah, you already heard the process. Divide in groups and arrange the meshes, the same as before, which is probably as good a time as any to explain why I'm doing this in a single texture. Truth be told, I'll be using two textures, one for the base colors, another for the cross-hatching and shadows over them. As we all know, JoJo is very famous for its different color palettes, in covers and certain scenes. I found that, yes, this also translates to the openings. So I wanted to have an easy way to swap textures with different colors for these different moments. In my first attempt, I discovered this idea. I made Josuke anime style, and then I made him in the style of the color version of the manga, and realized that it was better to adjust the textures with a cross-hatching and shadow texture separate from the colors. So yeah, that is my approach so far. Like it or not, I think it's worth trying out. Alright, so it's time to begin the base textures. These textures will work as a baseline for me to test how the color looks in Blender, as well as giving me the actual locations of all of the details that need more attention so that I can adjust them inside a drawing program. But that's for the next video. For now, all I need to do is get a simple shader and add the base texture. For this, I decided to take the base texture size Blender offers and multiply it by 3. This allows me to get a pretty decent size for details. Now, I'll use a reference image to get the color of his skin and face. And you can't see it, but I'm checking at different Okuyasu references and decided to give him the color manga colors for his uniform. Here's where I find the first detail I already talked about, where the jacket outline was not properly marked, or perhaps some of the bevels and face insets moved the seam cuts away from each other. But yeah, I just had to mark this and then recolor, which took a little time, so
great success.
For the belts, I wanted to get some line details taking advantage of the mesh and divisions. However, yeah, they don't look good. So that's another detail for the drawing software. Now begins the fun part. With every base color added, I decided to paint the details I didn't actually model, like the $sign in Okuyasu's chest. As you can see, I suffer from undo syndrome, like your average artist. Then I added the buttons of the jacket and the details of the neck. Like I said, I want these details to be a reference rather than the final product, but of course, I want to have a good idea of the proportions so I can properly do them. Once these details are done, I felt like the texture was too plain, so I decided to at least add the buttons. This may work against me in the future, but it does look quite good. Then I also felt like I could add the $sign, but well, I didn't make it look good. So maybe we can try and fake it with the texture as well. After that, I adjusted this little detail in the neck and saved that image as the base color for color scheme 1 and began working on the cross hatching and shadows. I decided to begin with the top part of the hair and try to add this complex detail at the top. But again, this should be tackled on the drawing software. So I decided to roughly mark the parts that I'm still missing, like the details on his face, the jaw shadow, ears, the rest of the hair, fingers, and the shadows on the clothes. This makes me realize that I made the chest $sign a little too big, so maybe I could try and do it again, but I'll have to think about it. I added some details to the shoe, but it looks good as it is. And then I went on and added shadows in the pants, because I need to have an idea of how they could work, which is where I found out that yeah, the pants did join together. So I had to tweak around a lot to separate the legs and get this to look good. Luckily, this didn't affect the textures, so crisis handled. Once everything was textured and my texture had been properly saved, I wanted to test out a shader so I could get an idea of how this would look, so I used this tutorial to get the shader. Check it out! I like this shader since it allows you to get separate values of the shadows as well as being interactive with different color lights. But I may need to learn to handle this better. Now for the final part, Josuke's base texture. For this, I decided to make my own version of Okuyasu shader and a new texture so I wouldn't need to erase everything. Let's be honest, that's too much of a hassle. For Josuke, the process is the same as with Okuyasu, but quicker, because Josuke's model was one of the decently made ones. The one thing I had tweaked was the color of his skin due to the light. Then I went on and saved the base color texture and began the detail texture. Luckily for me, I already have some experience with Josuke's hair texturing, so I think that'll come in handy for this. Pretty cool, right? The last adjustment was to divide the neck so I could add the different details of the anchor and the heart. All I need to do now is move on to Jotaro and Koichi's textures, and then detail them in my drawing software. Pretty cool. So yeah, that was today's video. I'm sorry for not posting last week. It felt like it wasn't really progressing that far, and it still took me some time to get to this, so I might need to upload every 2 weeks now. But don't worry, I'll try and upload some content in between. Not about modeling or 3D, but about movies. Since I'm going to animate this, I thought it would be a good idea to inspect and analyze movies and knockoff movies to see people's approach to 3D modeling and why some fail harder than others. So stay put for that. As always, thank you very much for watching until the end. I really love making these videos and the reception they've been getting, so thank you for your support. You know the drill, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss new updates on these projects and whatever I end up getting into. I think you might like it. With nothing else to say, have an awesome week and I'll be seeing you around, pals!